You are listening to We Saw the Devil, an investigative and conversational true crime podcast that deep dives into fascinating criminal cases that are solved, unsolved, or ongoing. From America's Lori Vallow to Germany's Armin Meiwes, we examine and discuss the world's most shocking cases. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to follow us online. Check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com and We Saw the Devil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, you can become part of the show by backing us on Patreon. Hello everyone, and welcome to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and Jackie is once again not with us this evening, but that is okay. She will be joining us soon. I know all of you miss her and want her to come back. Maybe she's your favorite, who knows? But she will be coming back soon, I promise. I am super excited for this episode, guys, because it has actually been kind of in our upcoming show folder for probably a year now, and we just haven't found the right time. We did the Junko Furuta case and didn't really want to follow it up with something this terrible quite so soon. Yeah, it seemed like now is the time. So really excited about tonight's case. Topic is the Hello Kitty murder. Some of you may be familiar with it. For some reason, during quarantine and the pandemic, the story has kind of been making the rounds once again. So it is a doozy. Before we get into that, let's talk housekeeping. As always, you can find us on all social media outlets as We Saw the Devil. Our website is WeSawTheDevil.com. And if you have a question, concern, compliments, always appreciated, you can email us at info@WeSawTheDevil.com. And once again, don't forget about our Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/WeSawTheDevil. Check out all of the different tiers. If you love the show, like the show, want to support it, get some cool stuff while you do it, you can do that on Patreon. Also, if you're looking for another way to support the show, guys, 5-star reviews are always appreciated. If you're digging the show and plan to listen to more of it, please head over to Apple Podcasts and drop that 5-star review. It means the world to us. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? The setting for this episode is actually Hong Kong, and the year is 1999. I don't know what you guys are doing for 1999. Do you remember like Y2K and all of that stuff? What did you do on New Year's Eve of 1999? I am not ashamed. Now, I am not a country music fan, even though I was born and raised in Nashville. Not a country music fan. I'm so sorry to those of you who are. You know, Patsy Cline is about as far as I go down that rabbit hole. However, on New Year's Eve, 1999 going into 2000, I saw the Dixie Chicks live. I saw the Dixie Chicks. I want to know what you guys did, because I truly feel like that was a very pivotal moment. So leave a comment on the episode, tell us what you think of the episode, and then tell us what you did on Y2K New Year's Eve. So our setting is 1999, and one particular crime in Hong Kong gained a particular level of notoriety that many others did not. And that case quickly gained the name of the Hello Kitty murder. The press called it thus due to details which we'll be getting to momentarily. In May of 1999, a 13-year-old girl stumbled into a police station in the neighborhood of Tsim Sha Tsui. She was wild-eyed and shrieking. The police initially thought that she could have been the victim of a crime, but she shocked the officers by telling them that she was being haunted by a ghost. They laughed at the girl and started to lecture her about wasting their time, believing her to be either mentally ill, the victim of realistic nightmares, or ultimately on drugs. Ah Fong was already known to the police. Now, this is actually not her real name. This is the name later assigned to her, so this is an alias. Even at 13 years old, she already had a record, having run away from home and then publicly living with known gang members and drug dealers. So she was not in a good spot already at 13. The girl then began to describe in vivid detail how she, her boyfriend, and 2 other men mercilessly tortured a woman to death. And the police still didn't believe it. And that's possibly because in 1999, Hong Kong's homicide rate was just 1.23 per 100,000 people. It was literally one of the safest large cities in the entire world. Now, to put that in perspective, in 1999, New York City's homicide rate was 9.03. Hong Kong, 1.23. New York City, 9.03. Crazy high. Now, hearing graphic details involving a young woman being bound by electrical wire and tortured to death over a month shocked the officers, and they just didn't believe her story, but they took down the details to follow up on it later. Desperate to be believed, the girl demanded that they follow her to the apartment where the woman's remains were located, and they reluctantly agreed. Police followed the girl to her boyfriend's apartment number 31 on Granville Road in Kowloon. The boyfriend's name? Chan Man-lok, a mid-level drug dealer and gang member. As soon as the police approached the door, they knew that something was gravely wrong. The sweet smell of decay was overpowering. They entered the apartment. It was littered with trash, drug paraphernalia, and splattered with feces and blood. The tile flooring was crumbling and difficult to walk on, and peppering the apartment was Hello Kitty memorabilia, stuffed animals, towels, cutlery, sheets, decorative plates, pillows, curtains, and toys. And this was a luxury apartment building, so the state of this apartment was very much not indicative of that. Afong immediately walked them to the refrigerator, where they discovered muscle tissue and internal organs neatly packed in plastic bags and organized on the shelves. Before the officers could overcome that shock, she diverted their attention to a bloodied mermaid Hello Kitty doll that was on top of a stained mattress on the ground. After a quick examination, it was clear that something was inside of it. After opening up a series of stitches, inside the head of the doll, they discovered a human skull. The young girl admitted that the head belonged to 23-year-old missing nightclub hostess Fan Man Yi. By the age of 23, Fan Man Yi had led a very tumultuous, sad, and calamitous life. Born into extreme poverty, she was abandoned by her parents and left to fend for herself at the age of 4. She grew up in a girls' orphanage and experienced many, many hardships while there. As a teenager, she rebelled and associated with gang members and drug dealers, leading to both heroin and meth addictions by the age of 16. Fan turned to sex work to pay for her deepening drug habit and eventually worked in the brothels of Kowloon. She was repeatedly sexually, physically, and mentally abused by both her clients and bosses, who were almost always members of notorious Hong Kong triads. And a triad is more or less just a criminal family or criminal organization, as it were. These triads are transcontinental. One can be based out of China and then have other members, say, based in Los Angeles, New York City. There are actually quite a few in the United States currently as well. Fan desperately wanted out of that life. She had gotten pregnant, married the baby's father, and gave birth to a son. She and her husband were both active addicts, but they had plans to clean themselves up and create a fresh start for their child. Fan managed to get a job as a nightclub hostess in 1997, and this is where she met Chan Man-lok. Man-lok was a 34-year-old socialite and leader of a local triad. He was a well-known drug dealer and pimp with enough financial backing that the police largely left him alone. There's no doubt why Fan was drawn to him. He was attractive and flush with drugs and money, and the two struck up a friendship based on their commonalities, and Fan became involved in Man-lok's inner circle. He would pay her for sex, and there's actually some speculation that he was even her pimp for a brief period of time. They would spend hours having sex and smoking meth, and this lasted for almost 2 full years. On March 16th of 1999, while Fan was at Man-lok's 5-bedroom apartment, she noticed his wallet sitting on a table when he left the room. She quietly slipped over to it and took out its contents, which amounted to a little more than $2,500 US. The next day, on March 17th, Man-lok realized that Fan had been the one to steal his money and dispatched 2 of his most loyal associates, Lung Xing Cho and Lung Wai Lun, to collect her. Man-lok's plan was to force Fan to do sex work in order to pay off the debt. This lasted only a short while. It is unknown as to whether Fan paid off that debt. There are some sources that claim that she returned the full amount plus an additional $10,000 in compensation. Other sources claim she did sex work in order to pay off the debt, but Man-lok wouldn't let her go after she did. The exact scenario regarding this debt is unknown, but what is known is that Man-lok and his gang imprisoned Fan Man Yi and subjected her to some of the most heinous and vile torture imaginable. The beatings began almost immediately, along with bringing the men into the apartment for sex. The gang quickly realized that they could not sell her for sex because she was beaten and bruised too badly, and this fact angered them more. This case, as I said earlier, is extremely similar to the Junko Furuta case in terms of the physical acts of torture that the men committed upon Fan Man-yi. They took turns raping her and then strung her up from the ceiling by her feet. They took plastic straws and lit them on fire, melting the plastic all over the bottom of her feet until they blistered. They then burned the bottom of her feet off with an open flame in order to render her unable to walk. They then took hot chili oil and poured it into her blisters. Every day for a month, the cycle was the same. They would hang her from the ceiling while they slept and only let her down during the day. They would beat her until they grew bored of it. They would use iron bars and metal pipes. The men smoked large amounts of meth and then beat Man-yi until she lost consciousness. Then they would go play video games and eat to pass the time until she came to. Then the cycle would repeat. When they grew tired of beating her, they escalated. They threw oyster sauce, fish sauce, and cooking oils into her face and eyes. They forced her to drink motor oil and then attempted to set it on fire. They urinated and defecated in her mouth and would beat her unconscious if she spit it out or vomited in disgust. Man-yi was there for almost exactly 1 full month enduring these heinous acts. The next month, on April 15th, 1999, the 3 men returned from a trip to the arcade and went to sleep. When they woke up, they discovered that Fan Man-yi had succumbed to her wounds and passed away. Manlock reportedly said, quote, "Now she must be destroyed." The group dismembered Fan's body together after they moved her body to the bathroom. Chan Man-lock immediately took a hacksaw and removed her head. It took the other 2 10 hours to saw her body into pieces, taking and saving the teeth, muscle tissue, and internal organs. Those were all bagged and put into the fridge, and they tossed her bones and remaining tissue down the trash chute of the apartment building. Man-lock took Fan's head and put it into a pot of boiling water on the stove. He put Lung Xing-cho in charge of this. During this 10-hour process, the group got hungry and decided to make a pot of noodles. They added a second pot to the stove and ended up using the same set of chopsticks to stir both pots. Once Fan's skull was mostly clean, Man-lock grabbed a Hello Kitty mermaid doll and sewed the skull into the head area. Remember Ah Fong, the 13-year-old girl who had gone to the police department and said that she was being terrorized by a ghost? Yeah, well, she claimed that it was the ghost of Fan Mi. Why, you might ask? Because she was there. Ah Fong, at 13, was 34-year-old Chan Man-lock's girlfriend. He had at one time been her pimp, and she had worked underneath him as a child prostitute. Sadly and tragically, she had a very similar background to Fan Man-yi. She not only witnessed these acts of torture, but she participated in it. She beat, burned, tortured, and abused Fan Man-yi herself alongside the 3 men, and willingly. She even described how she defecated in a shoebox and forced Fan to eat it. When the police officers and investigators asked her why she did that, she replied, quote, "Well, she was broken, and playing with her wasn't so much fun after that, but we carried on anyway. There wasn't anything else to do." In order to secure charges against the 3 men, Ah Fong was granted complete immunity for her testimony. Again, Ah Fong is not her real name. This is the name that she was given in court due to her age in order to keep her anonymous. The trial lasted 6 full weeks. The 3 men were tried together and denied murdering her. They did, however, admit to preventing her from receiving a lawful burial. The prosecution had its work cut out for it from the very start. Because investigators were unable to determine Fan's exact cause of death, it opened up a reasonable doubt. The 3 men claimed that she died from an overdose and that they panicked and dismembered her body. The prosecution, with Ah Fong as the sole witness, brought her on to testify in front of the jury. But without proof that the 3 men murdered Fan and caused her death, the jury did not convict them of murder. However, they were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 2020. In 2003, the attorneys for the 3 men appealed the ruling, reasoning that the sentence was excessive considering that it could not be proven that they were responsible for Fan's death. Lung Xing-cho won his bid to have his conviction overturned and obtained a retrial date. But unfortunately, there is no information whatsoever on what the outcome of that trial was, but one of them did in fact win his appeal and got a retrial. By all accounts, he was not the mastermind of this entire situation, but I think they all belong in prison for the rest of their lives. The apartment building where Fan Man Yi had tragically lost her life was demolished in 2012, and then a luxury hotel was built on top of it. That is all the information that we have. I am curious as to whether you have heard of this case. I scoured the internet for hours and hours and hours, gained the assistance of a few friends, and I cannot find an actual update past 2003. Originally for this episode, what we were going to do is discuss crimes in general that involve dolls, because there's something about dolls that is just a little extra creepy. Clowns don't particularly bother me, but for some reason, dolls are really freaking just no. While researching, I did find another story that was pretty crazy too. And I love how it begins with a Florida man. And this story came out on October 31st, so Halloween of 2017. And I'm reading it from the New York Daily News. What happened is police were called to a home. An older woman called the police and reported smelling a foul odor in her son's bedroom. She lived alone with her son. When police officers arrived, 32-year-old Jerome Wright exited his bedroom naked and sweaty. Police were like, "WTF, sir, what are you doing?" And he told them that he had a stomach ache. So police, obviously, after smelling this nasty stench, went into his bedroom and they found bodily fluid on his bed and in a trash can. Inside the closet, they discovered the body of 52-year-old Deanna Clendenin. Now, at one point, Deanna Clendenin had been Wright's girlfriend. And then, quote, according to police, the body had a laceration across the stomach and some of the internal organs had been removed. The organs were later found in a trash can outside the home. His mother, Della Wright, told officers that she lived there with her son and that sometimes his girlfriend would stay with them or sleep over. And in a, I guess, true Florida man fashion, her son, now literally being caught with a mutilated corpse in his closet, tried to say that everything that they found in his bedroom was from the internet. And the cops were like, "Yo, man, what about that body in your closet?" He told them that it was a, quote, sex doll made of flesh. I'm sure the police were like, okay. He also told them that he hadn't seen his girlfriend in 5 months. So he was arrested and charged with abusing a corpse. Her body was so badly decomposed that they could not actually determine how she died. And what's so fascinating, I was like, okay, well, this is crazy. And then I actually did a good bit more reading on the case, and it's actually tragically sad. And if you haven't heard of this case, I very much would, because it just kind of chronicles just how awful mental health care is in this country. I mean, we already all know that, right? But just reading this interview with his mother, Della Wright, and it basically chronicles her struggle with him since he was a small child. Jerome Wright was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was a young teenager. He would just have episodes of screaming out of nowhere and for no apparent reason whatsoever. His behaviors manifested when he was about 14 years old. When he was 15 years old, he had his first brush with the police. He refused to actually leave with his babysitter. His mother, wanting to help, called police to scare him. He ended up punching a cop and then got charged with battery on a law enforcement officer. So I can't imagine how his mother felt with that. He was on probation. It was supposed to be for 1 year, but it kept getting extended because he kept testing positive for marijuana. So then the court ordered him to Riverside Academy, which was an all-boys reform school in Tampa, Florida. So he spent a year there, and he was on medication. He apparently did very, very, very well on his medication. Around 17 years old, he was let out of that program, and he was homeless. He dropped out of high school, and he was legally declared disabled because of the severity of his schizophrenia. At 19, he had a series of felonies for buying cocaine and selling drugs. And every single time he was arrested, whether it was for an outburst due to his schizophrenia or drug dealing, he would always get probation, but there would be no assistance or no mental health treatment. Della Wright, his mother, tried apparently incredibly hard to advocate for him. She got him many, 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 many jobs from the Homeless Assistance Center. She got him multiple hard labor jobs through a local pool. She also even tried to assist him in getting his GED. She bought him the study guide, the book, a tutor, and he never completed any of it. And this article has some really crazy statistics. In the year 2016, over 190,000 people in the state of Florida were sent to psychiatric hospitals under Florida's Baker Act. Now, the Baker Act allows police or medical personnel to involuntarily commit someone for up to 72 hours if they are a danger to themselves or others. In the last 15 years, that number has more than doubled. Florida itself, maybe part of the reason we keep hearing about Florida man is that it ranks dead ass last among states in what they spend on mental health. Also, a lot of their jails and prisons have been obviously house a lot of mentally ill people and inmates. They don't get support for their mental health. So a lot of people just continuously fall through the cracks. And Jerome Wright was one of those people. There are countless, probably hundreds of instances that proved that he needed incredibly close monitoring and assistance for his mental health. And it didn't happen. So the reason, other than the tie of the doll that I bring this up, is for as terrible and awful as the Hello Kitty murder is, something at least good came out of Jerome's Wright case because his mother, Della, she actually had to get a restraining order against her own son because he was so violent and there was so much tension between them. She ended up getting a judge to overturn that restraining order, and she has 100% doubled down in support of her son. She's also become a very strong advocate for mental health care. So if you want to look her up, her name is Della Wright, and she basically is an advocate and activist in Florida for changing mental health laws. As far as Jerome Wright, he may actually never stand trial for this crime. A judge actually declared him mentally incompetent. And that is something that we've discussed on this podcast because, say, states like Idaho, there's no mental incompetence or insanity plea, right? Bringing this into the Lori Vallow case. So in Florida, though, a judge declared him mentally incompetent, so he's rehabilitating basically at a South Florida psychiatric hospital. If his lawyers are successful and can prove that he did not know right from wrong at the time of the crime, he could potentially be declared not guilty by reason of insanity. I find that absolutely fascinating. In contrast, in Idaho, they will continuously rehabilitate you until a judge deems that you are competent. In Florida, you can actually be completely declared incompetent. So that was a crazy little story to just happen to run across online, and thought that I would tack that onto this one because of the doll connection there. And what's so sad too is that when police arrived at the home and Jerome Wright was telling them, no, that's a blow-up doll, that's just a sex doll that I purchased off the internet, they actually had a court psychiatrist interview him, and they believed that he 100% believed his ex-girlfriend's deceased body to be an actual blow-up doll. Regardless of how you look at it, guys, that is incredibly sad. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Again, Jackie will in fact be back for our next episode. We have a lot of stuff coming for you. Thank you for listening. Again, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media platforms. You can find us at WeSawTheDevil.com. And if you're digging the show and want to financially back it, you can do so at patreon.com/WeSawTheDevil. And if you would like to just shoot us a line and shoot the shit, you can do so at info@WeSawTheDevil.com. Until next crime.